Hello, welcome back. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. We're going to take a look through the papers now, and with me to review them are the columnist Esther Craikhu and Peter Geoghegan, who's an investigative journalist. I should have practiced saying that.
That's okay. Say it 5 times fast.
Absolutely not. Let's just crack on with the papers, shall we? And we are turning, first of all, to a story inside the Mail, Peter, and this is quite an interesting survey looking at people's reactions to tax and political parties.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's a survey that's come out from Redfield and Wilton Strategies, who do a lot of polling on this sort of thing, and it's finding that Labour are now the party seen by the public as of lowering taxes rather than the Tories. If you drill into it, actually, the headline's slightly more is slightly overselling it in some respects. Most people associate 35% of those surveys associate the Conservatives with raising taxes, and 30% associate Labour with raising taxes. And the figures for lowering taxes are lower for both parties. So, like, basically, most people associate politicians with raising taxes. Unsurprisingly, the tax burden is high in this country, especially because there's such a focus on income tax. So, you know, but it's bad news for the Tories, and the way it's the Mail, so it's very much spun around the pressure on Jeremy Hunt to lower taxes. But
which the Mail are part of, aren't they?
Very much so, and it's interesting who they quote in it. They've got both Ian Duncan Smith and John Redwood, 2 MPs, very much in the right of the party, pushing we must have tax cuts now. The reality is that the public finances in Britain are in a poor state, and there is no fiscal headroom really, and it looks like Hunt is going to try and create some rabbits out of hats, maybe with some tinkering around the edges. But the idea that there'll be huge tax cuts, and actually the idea that they would make a big difference on the public. If you look at polling, most people don't put tax cuts. They're about 8 to 10% generally say that they want to see tax cuts. It's not a hugely popular policy, but the Mail,
it's really more money.
Well, it's because of the kinds of taxes that they think of cutting. That's the issue. I mean, he's thinking of cutting inheritance tax, which hardly anyone pays anyway.
5%,
I mean, exactly. If you're making the point of cutting taxes, you want to look at increasing the tax-free threshold or cutting NI, which actually penalises working people. But, you know, the Tories haven't made any noise about that. So most people associate tax cuts with tinkering at the edges. They don't really do anything, particularly not for the working class. And I think that's the frustration that we're seeing now. Most people have no faith in either party, particularly the Tories, which is supposed to be the fiscally disciplined party.
Yeah, and because of that, they'll be frustrated at that polling, won't they?
Exactly.
Let's move on to The Guardian, Esther, because there's a story here about how much we're spending on the unhealthy stuff.
Yes, so apparently Britain spends £80 billion a year on junk food, alcohol and tobacco, which is not unsurprising. We're a nation that's getting fatter and unhealthier, unfortunately. But what I find interesting is the fact that they've somehow linked this to, obviously, the Ministry of Health and the fact that this strains the NHS, but they're not talking about the culture, because why are people eating this unhealthily? It's because most people are time poor, so these types of cheap foods and addictive habits are easier for people to stomach in terms of time and costs, certainly, and we're in a cost of living crisis. But I think ultimately the argument here should be how does the NHS become more proactive in people's dietary habits and lifestyle habits, because the NHS actually does spend most of its money on lifestyle-related illnesses linked to alcoholism and obesity. But this is quite unsurprising, because we are quite an unhealthy country.
Yeah, I mean, so many different issues, and how you deal with it. As soon as there are kind of pushes to stop people eating like this, but it's called the nanny state, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Woolly mammoths.
Well, we promised.
I shout that because I've been promising.
We promised woolly mammoths. Yes, we did. And it turns out that there will be. There's a front page story in the Daily Star which says that in just under 2,000 days, if giant-headed DNA boffins are to be believed, which made me think I actually almost want to see a giant-headed DNA boffin. It made me think of like a kind of Dan Dare comic from the 60s.
Yeah, I'm more intrigued by seeing an enormous headed boffin than a woolly mammoth.
So they're saying, you know, it's not April the 1st, but it's in that place. I think the idea behind the story is that actually there's the opportunities now with DNA changes to actually, you know, to engineer new types of animals, engineer like potentially animals that haven't existed for a long time ago, and so which is really interesting. There's huge advances been made in DNA sequencing and especially when it comes to animals, but more generally across the potential for this sort of thing is really, really interesting. And in some ways this is a fun story just to flag it up.
I'm curious who asked for this. I don't know who sat down and think, you know what, we should bring back woolly mammoths. Exactly, because I was thinking they should bring back the dodo bird or like saber-toothed tigers, something more cool. I mean, woolly mammoths are just hairy elephants, aren't they?
We should have a referendum on it.
Exactly.
Which animals to bring back?
And dodo birds, absolutely. The turkey's cousin.
Let's get your vote.
Yeah.
Okay, we are out of time, but it's been really lovely having you both here this morning. Thanks so much for taking us through the papers today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do stay with us. We've got lots coming up here on Sky News Breakfast.